How's it going, everyone? In today's video, I've got two big Steam Deck news stories to cover for you here on Deck Ready. First of all, you might have seen the video on Digital Foundry where they got ray tracing running by installing Windows 11 on the Steam Deck, but there's an easier way to do it without installing Windows. And second, the Steam Deck is pretty powerful with its built-in APU, but you can actually make it even more powerful by connecting an external GPU, or just a regular PC GPU that becomes an external GPU. We're gonna talk about it later in the video, but before I jump into it, guys, I gotta do the classic YouTuber thing. Gotta ask you to help me get to 10,000 subscribers. I am so close. When I'm recording this video, I'm at 9,666, which is super metal. Kinda don't wanna go up from there, but if you could help me get to 10,000, that would be awesome. All right, so one of my favorite channels here on YouTube is Digital Foundry. I didn't really know what they were all about when I was a console gamer, but when I switched over to PC as my main device around 5 years ago, I got like fully addicted to the videos they make. My favorite videos are the ones they put out around a game's launch where they show you the best and most optimized settings for PC games. Those never lead me astray, and their Steam Deck coverage has been pretty good. We talked about here on the channel the video where they showed off games like Horizon Forbidden West, God of War, and Days Gone, and showed how well they ran locked at 30 frames per second using the PS4's original settings. And there's a new video up on the channel where they talk about ray tracing on the Steam Deck, trying it in games like Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition, Microsoft Flight Simulator, and Quake 2 with RTX. Obviously, a month in, we all know that the Steam Deck is a pretty capable device. It's pretty damn powerful, but there's not a lot of games, well, there's not really any games just yet that include ray tracing. Even games like Control that have ray tracing on Windows, if you boot that game up and go into the settings, you're not gonna see a ray tracing option. And I've seen a few videos now saying that SteamOS does not support ray tracing, and that is just simply untrue. There's a great article you should definitely read because it goes super in depth over on my new favorite website, Gaming on Linux. And basically right now, you can activate ray tracing per game on a ton of games on the Steam Deck, but Control is obviously a great example because it's a pretty versatile game and it's one of the biggest games that Valve has shown off running on the Steam Deck from the very beginning. So in the actual article, which again, I encourage you to go check it out, there's a launch option you can set for Control that'll activate the ray tracing section of the menu. And as you'll see, if you turn on ray tracing in Control, even at medium settings, you can do whatever you want. It's probably gonna run at around 4 to 10 frames per second, which isn't great. And that seems to be why ray tracing is kind of hidden in SteamOS as a whole. It's just not ready yet. The drivers aren't there to support it. And when you do activate it in its current state, it's not gonna run all that well. I mean, even in the Digital Foundry video when they were running Quake 2, a really old game with RTX turned on, it was very tough for them to get it at a playable state. I think that when they tried to do it at close to a native 800p, it was running at around 15 frames per second. And that makes a lot of sense. I have a computer at home, my main gaming PC. It's a laptop. It's got an Intel 11th gen i7, 32 gigs of RAM, and a mobile 3080. And even in Control, to use ray tracing, I have to use DLSS, and that's at 60 frames per second locked at 1440p at a mix of medium and high settings. But my laptop's fan is absolutely cranking the entire time I'm doing it. So seeing that and then looking at the Steam Deck, as powerful as it is, it kind of makes sense why ray tracing is so hard to get running on it. But the fact that that functionality is there, it's in SteamOS, it works with the RDNA chip that the Steam Deck uses, we could see ray tracing in the future if Valve and AMD together can figure out how to optimize the drivers. It would be really cool to see this because I thought it was a gimmick at first, you know, like when Avatar came out and everyone was like, 3D is the future of movies, man. And it was like, yeah, is it though? And now there's no 3D movies really anymore. It kind of felt like when ray tracing was announced, that's what it would be. But then I started seeing it in games like Control and just seeing how immediately noticeable the changes are when that special lighting is active. I really want to see more games take advantage of it, and I want to see some optimization so you don't have to run games at like 1080p, 30 frames per second. I mean, it's a big feature on the Xbox Series X and the PS5, but when you use it in pretty much any game that supports it, save a few like Doom Eternal and Ghostwire Tokyo, you basically have to drop the resolution down to 1080p or lower. It's usually dynamic, and the games cap out at around 30 frames per second. And the only reason Doom Eternal's ray tracing works so well is just because A, that game is super well optimized, and B, it's not doing all that much in the ray tracing department. It looks much better when you turn it on, but it's not like a night and day difference. difference. Where I think this is really going to come into play with the Steam Deck is with a future iteration of the device. Like if Valve makes a Steam Deck 2 or a Steam Deck Slim that's a little bit more powerful a couple of years down the line, they'll already have this functionality built in to just turn on and activate with a newer chip inside, which would be great, right? I want Valve to make more Steam Decks. I know we just got our first Steam Decks and a lot of people still don't have them, but if this thing's lifespan is 3 to 4 years, I will gladly shell out $400 or more a second time to get a newer device, because I think this is going to be a new version of console gaming. Like we've already seen the One X Player Mini is moving over from Windows 11 support to have SteamOS 3 in the future, which is awesome. I want to see as many of these handheld PCs as possible using SteamOS, because that's what's going to make developers like Bungie, who don't allow games like Destiny 2 to run on the Steam Deck, really put in the legwork to really make sure games like Destiny 2 work with Proton and don't get you instantly banned for trying to do it. I think it would be just fine if they turned it on right now. I tried using Windows 11 off a micro SD card. It's not the best experience, but it totally works. I downloaded Destiny 2 to that SD card, and when I played it, it was running at medium settings, perfectly locked at 30 frames per second at 720p. That's exactly what I expect out of this device, but if I was able to do it in Proton, I'd be able to use that built-in FSR. It would probably run a whole lot better because the drivers are more well optimized for the SteamOS side of the Steam Deck. And hey, maybe we could drop the resolution down, use FSR, keep the settings at around medium, and boost the frame rate to 60 frames per second, because man, Destiny is so much better at 60 frames per second. I mean, that's not really a surprise. Every shooter is better at 60 frames per second than 30. So yeah, I just wanted to give a huge shout out to this article over on Gaming on Linux, because I would have had no idea how easy it is to get ray tracing working even right now on the most stable, up-to-date software that the Steam Deck is running. It really is that simple. I just wouldn't recommend it just yet. And speaking of things that you probably shouldn't try but are really, really cool, the YouTuber ETA Prime, who is awesome. If you're into emulation, handheld PCs, or Linux gaming, you've definitely seen videos from this channel. They basically took a Steam Deck and connected a super powerful GPU to it, and it actually worked. Now, there are a lot of caveats to this. First of all, you need to have the back of your Steam Deck off. You need to have an adapter that connects it to the M2 slot on your Steam Deck's motherboard that has a cord hanging off of it that connects to the graphics card. And then you can only do this on Windows for now, because while your M2 slot is taken up, you have to boot Windows off of a micro SD card, and there's no easy way right now to boot SteamOS 3 off of a micro SD. So again, you're stuck with Windows. But keeping all those caveats in mind, if you go through this process, you'll be able to basically use your Steam Deck as a full-on, super powerful gaming PC. Now, the video goes way more in depth on all of this, but it is just so cool seeing this actually work. If you want to play a game like The Witcher 3, which came out back in 2015, that one is running at 4K ultra settings and pulling over 100 frames per second, which is crazy. The only issue is that if you do decide to do this, you kind of get capped performance because there is a CPU bottleneck. Like, you can plug as powerful of a GPU as you want into the Steam Deck, but the CPU is just going to continually bottleneck the device on newer games. And you see this in the video with Elden Ring. You can max it out, but you're only going to be able to get a maximum of around 46 to 50 frames per second. But if you're okay running it at 30 frames per second, you'll still have to deal with the stutter and lagginess that you get in the Windows version of Elden Ring, but it is pretty cool that you're able to do this on the Steam Deck. And the same thing goes for Cyberpunk 2077. It runs really well at 4K ultra settings, but you're only going to really be able to pull around 45, 50 frames per second out of it, because even though the GPU they used, a Radeon 6900 XT, is super powerful and should have no problem running that game at 4K ultra 60 frames per second, that CPU is a bottleneck. And that's not to say the CPU in the Steam Deck is underpowered, because it's definitely not. It's crazy that it's able to support 4K ultra 60 and above with The Witcher 3. It just doesn't need to be that much more powerful because you're playing on a handheld device. You know, you're maxing out games at around 800p, so you don't really need a super powerful CPU, because that's going to heat the device up and that's going to drain your battery, which this is a handheld. You want to get as much battery out of it as possible. I think Valve has done a good job tuning it to get the most power out of it while also getting acceptable battery life. Now, the funny thing is, I've seen so many websites writing up this video, and on Twitter, the first comment, or in the articles, the first comment is always, why would you do this? And they say it in the video multiple times. They do it for fun. Like, this is what sets the Steam Deck apart from something like a Nintendo Switch. On the surface, they look pretty similar, especially if for your Nintendo Switch, you have something like the Satisfy grip that basically doubles the size of the thing and makes it the size of a Steam Deck. But when you look at what you're able to do on both devices, the Steam Deck is just a completely different machine. It literally is a portable PC, and this is stuff you could just never do with a Nintendo Switch. Like, Valve is allowing you to take the back off of this device, plug a GPU into it, and then you can install Windows, a different operating system than the one it ships with, and everything will just work as it's supposed to, which is absolutely nuts. Now, I'll admit, when I saw ETA Prime's thumbnail for the first time, I was like, should I try this with my Steam Deck? But the second I clicked on that video and saw how much work you actually have to do by opening it up, plugging this graphics card into your M2 slot, that's a little bit more than I want to do with my Steam Deck right now, especially when they're so hard to get. And also, the video they made is absolutely awesome, so if you haven't seen it yet, you should definitely go check it out. But you know what really got me thinking? Like, we're still waiting for Valve's official dock for the Steam Deck, which cannot get here soon enough, but what if in the future, like with the future iteration of the Steam Deck, like the Steam Deck 2, for example, you're able to use a better dock that has an enclosure for a stronger GPU. So when you take your Steam Deck on the go, it's pretty powerful on its own, but then when you're at home, you can dock it, plug in your monitor, plug in your mouse and keyboard, have a GPU right there in the dock, and you'll have a much more powerful PC ready to go. Now, I say future iterations because I'm 99% sure that right now the Steam Deck can't support an eGPU running through the USB-C slot, which is why they kind of had to go in there and do it through the M2 slot. And also, I would want that CPU bottleneck figured out in a similar scenario. But because SteamOS is being opened up and allowed on pretty much any device that wants it, when Valve actually releases it, I bet you'll see some iterations of the Aya Neo or the One X player that have the ability to dock with an external graphics card. And that's the coolest thing about this. Nothing is really stopping that. So again, while I don't think anyone is going to rush to do this with their Steam Deck, it's still super cool that ETA Prime did it. So go check out their video. I will have it linked in the description.